Hello, everyone. My name is Mirella, and I'm a career coach. And today I'm talking to Captain Robin Ferrier. Hello, Robin. How are you?
Hello, Mirella, and thank you very much for taking the time to let me come on your video blog. I'm very honored. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm really happy to see you again, and I'm glad we can have this chat. Um,
Absolutely.
I will quickly tell a few words about what we're doing. We actually talked for the first time some time ago when you actually were in the middle of some changes in your life.
Indeed.
And we actually talked about careers. We talked about aviation back then. And I'm a career coach who basically focuses on cabin crew and those who want to stop flying and want to start some new careers. And I would like you to say a few things about your experiences also, because you've been through many changes. You worked for different airlines, so you can definitely share your experience as well.
Indeed, indeed. Absolutely, Mirella. Well, thank you. Just to give you an idea of who I am, I'm a Scotsman from Edinburgh, and for 20 years I've been a pilot working for various airlines, predominantly in the UK. But then about 7 years ago, I spread my wings and moved over to Italy and started working for other European-based airlines. And during that time, came across a few medical hiccups, as you might call them, and that gave me, well, shall we call them challenges? Other people might call them other words, but I would like to call them challenges because that's a much more positive way of looking at things. But it kept me out of flying for at least a year, and during that year, how can I best describe it? I began to look at flying from a slightly different point of view. I began to see it more as a way of earning money rather than the profession that I'd loved. And, I would have given anything to follow, as so many of us do. So during that time, I also managed to have another look at life from a slightly different point of view. And I read this little book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by this rather lovely American lady called Susan Jeffers, a doctor. And that little book probably saved me from a lot of pain. By pain, I mean mental stress, anguish, misery, depression. And so I was very impressed by it. And I was so impressed by it that I actually became an instructor to teach the skills and tools that Susan herself had felt very important that other people expose themselves to because of the pain and suffering that goes on in the world. In a way, you could call it unnecessary pain because there are ways to get around it. So I took that up and I thoroughly enjoyed helping people find their way forward in life. But aviation came back and I became a pilot again. And I've been that pilot for 1 year now. And of course, here we are in the middle of this pandemic. And I don't think I'm any different from thousands and thousands of other people around the world who have been utterly blindsided by this whole event. It's been really quite a shock to, I would suspect, most people. The effect of it has been enormous and so widespread, and it's only beginning to really pan out in terms of we're not really truly sure where this is taking us yet. The effects of it are yet unknown, and we're all trying very hard to establish a line into the future to see where it's all going. But with such little information, that's virtually an impossible act to do. And without the ability to predict well into the future, we are now stressed. We're disorientated. We're kind of lost because we've been in quarantine for 3 months. We've come out from the world we knew, and it's all changed. It's all different. The rules have changed, and how do you behave? How do you act when you don't know what the rules are? It just so happens that my training has been a very useful tool in helping me move forward in these hard times. And so, really, I can only tell you that that little book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, has provided me with so much. And that's kind of my potted history, Mirella, and I hope gives you a little bit of insight into who I am and where I've been.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And you also decided to write your own book that is titled Life Resource Management. Could you share a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, sure. Well, that is a very welcome opportunity, as you might imagine, for me. But the fact is, in January of this year, I'd spent the whole of the Christmas holidays thinking about the fact that there's a lot of, shall we call them, younger people joining the aviation industry who have maybe joined us from school or from college or university, or maybe have not had a vast amount of life experience behind them before entering into an industry which can be very, very demanding on you, demanding on your time, on your relationships, on your sanity, and your ability to keep motivated. And so it struck me that, I've been flying for 20 years. Before that, I was a businessman, and I've had the fortune to have an insight into how people behave under pressure. And so I thought I really need to do something about the younger people who are interesting in entering our industry. And so hence the book. But I never imagined for 1 minute that we would then be confronted with this COVID pandemic, which would just change everything. There is nothing that remains unchanged within aviation as a result of this. And ironically, just because of the timing, the book seems to fill a lot of the empty spaces that I think need to be filled. We're talking about things like how to motivate yourself, how to avoid the panic that comes with being uncertain. Because at the moment, that's really, I think, what we're facing is just a vast sea of uncertainty. We're all trying very hard to, as I said earlier, extrapolate into the future to see where we're all going, to see how we can make a living for ourselves, how we can pay the bills. And we try using the old techniques and the old ways to try and establish a plan for ourselves. But those old ways no longer apply in many cases. We now need to adapt and survive. And so our expectations of the future may well have to change. Now, I don't want to sound in any way negative. I am the last person to instill fear in anybody, and certainly don't want to appear negative. But the world has changed. Our aviation industry has changed. And I think it would be inappropriate of me to suggest that we just carry on and hope everything's going to get better. It will get better. There is no doubt about it. But in the interim, I think it would be prudent for people like you and me to help others to move forward in providing a plan B. Everybody needs a plan B in this life. And so the book, I believe, does a lot towards providing that plan B. And it also allows people to not suffer during that process of, shall we call it, realignment. There's so much pain and suffering comes from uncertainty and trying to match old goals which no longer apply. We all have these ambitions for ourselves about getting a nice house and marrying at a certain age and having kids. And we have so many of these things set up for ourselves and also created by others for us that actually we can't really achieve given the present circumstances. So you need tools, you need techniques and methods to find your way through this mist of uncertainty. And I believe that's what my book does. And it's called Life Resource Management for a reason. And as I'm sure you understand, coming from an aviation background, crew resource management is very much part of our very existence. It's how we relate to each other. But crew resource management, it deals with how we behave at work. It dictates how we relate to each other at work, and it relates how we relate to the technology that we use in our work. And one of the problems about that is that it doesn't take into account what happens when we're not at work. And that is a large part of our life. And I think it takes us back to, do you work to live or do you live to work? What's most important in your life? And all I can tell you is that after 20 years of flying, it's very easy to forget that life is more than just going to work. It's so crucial that we have happy memories of family and good things to look forward to, rather than just a paycheck and a gold watch after 30 years. So that's what I'm all about. I'm all about helping people to find their way forward, to generally find the joy in life. Because you know that phrase, life's a bitch and then you die. Well, it's bullshit. It's absolute not true. But the trouble is, if you allow yourself to fall into the trap of being a victim, that's exactly how you feel. And I give you myself as an example. I have felt that way on many occasions. You know, life is unfair, it's unjust, and I need to, shout at somebody because it's not right. And then I began to realize that the only person that can change the way I feel is me. And so that really is why I feel so strongly about what's going on in the aviation industry now. I see so many people suffering, and they won't admit it because it's our job as pilots, as cabin crew, to be self-contained, to be independent, to be strong. We're not allowed to get together in little huddles and say, "Don't worry, everything's going to be all right." We just get on with the job because that's what we're paid to do. But now, here we are. There is no little group to huddle around. We don't have our friends and our colleagues in the cockpit and in the cabin to work with. We just have ourselves and our families and the world we find ourselves in right now. And it's not always a forgiving world. So that's what I believe you, Mirella, and myself and people like us can do to help people in the industry that we both have come to love.